Emergency food assistance in northeast Nigeria has come to a halt, leaving over 1.3 million people without support. Now, this comes as the country faces its worst hunger crisis on record, with nearly 31 million Nigerians struggling to find enough to eat. Now, the shutdown also affects over 300,000 young children who will no longer have access to nutrition clinics, especially in conflict-hit states like Borno and Yobe states. Now, the crisis is fueled by a combination of surging violence, displacements, soaring food prices, and climate shocks like floods that have wiped out crops. With no more food stocks and critical funding shortages, vulnerable families now face hard choices, going hungry, migrating, or even becoming easy targets for extremist groups. Now, to discuss more on this, I am joined by Dr. Osita Okonkwo, his country director, Nutrition International. I beg your pardon. Thank you so much, Dr. Okonkwo, for joining me at this time. All right, now,
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, Doctor. Now, can you walk us through the sequence of events that led to the suspension of emergency food and nutrition assistance for over 1.3 million people in northeast Nigeria by the end of July?
Yeah, I think this may be an offshoot from the freeze of funding coming from USAID to major partners, especially the World Food Programme, who have been providing support to this very vulnerable population in the Northeast. It's obvious that this funding cuts has also affected the operations in those areas. And being the fact that most of the interventions that have been provided to this population were dependent on the support provided by these partners, it's obvious that then that when they have funding cuts, which is not able to help make them sustain their interventions and operations in these areas, this has grossly affected the amount of work they could do and the amount of support they could provide to the population that are displaced in these very vulnerable areas in Northeast.
Okay. Dr. Okonkwo, now 31 million Nigerians, now are facing acute hunger as it is. This is the highest number on record, right? The appeal for Nigeria sought $130 million in funding to keep relief operations running through 2025. But yet only 21% of that has been secured. That is, you still have like 69% more to go. Do you have any ideas, which key donors, aside the US aid, which key donors, have cut back? Why as well?
Well, you should know, we have donors from the European Union who also are facing some internal issues in their countries, trying to balance it between what they can provide for welfare for their own people and what they could also be able to provide for foreign aids. This has cut across a lot of countries in Europe. And of course, we also know the new dimensions in countries, including the British government, have also been able to look at what amount of support needs to be given, on the foreign aids as it affects also their own internal welfare support for their own people. So it's not as though any country would like not to support developing countries like Nigeria, but of course they also have to balance it with their own internal issues to be able to, see where they can squeeze out funds to support, their foreign assistance. So across board, many of the donors have had a lot of issues in their own countries to deal with, and that has affected, how much available resources can be devoted to foreign assistance. And that, I think, is what is really happening at the moment. But then it also provides opportunity for us to look inward and see what domestic resource mobilization can be initiated in countries. So countries need to also begin to look inward to see how can we ramp up resources to be able to do some of the things that we have left to donors over a very long time, and begin to build our own internal systems to address all these emerging issues across board.
All right, Dr. Kwankwo, but is this also, the funding cuts, is it also a ripple effect of, funding cuts, recent funding cuts, in other West and Central African countries where aid has been halted, for example, in Mali and also in Mauritania? Have these funding cuts, yes, have they affected Nigeria's donor confidence as well?
No, I don't think it's about donor confidence in its own sense, but I think it's more of dealing with their own internal crisis. Generally there are inflation in most countries, and the countries are balancing their budgets to address their own internal country issues. So foreign aid becomes very prominent also when they have the resources to be able to address those. So basically, if you go look across the main donors in Europe, and even in the United States, the U.S. government has passed a bill to reduce foreign aids that they could have provide. And also, many countries are cutting back and then put countries at task to address their own issues. So it's not only for Nigeria, it's happening across many countries, and it's becoming a global issue. So countries are being encouraged to, look inwards to see what effort they could also make for their own people. And I think that is the direction that's been promoted across the board.
All right. Dr. Kwankwo, now let's speak on the logistical and security challenges, that the humanitarian community face, especially in reaching some of these displaced populations amidst rising violence and banditry in Borno and Yobe states especially, because reports actually do show that 2.3 million people have been displaced by conflict in northern Nigeria. So how is this mass movement, reshaping both urban and rural food security needs?
Yeah, like you rightly said, there are mass migration from the rural to the urban because people are displaced from their homelands, and these are people who are engaged in subsistence farming, and they are more of those who are also very much involved in agriculture in those areas, and they are moved to become entirely displaced, where they don't even have access to the farm to be able to get productively involved. And I think that is also contributing significantly to the food security crisis we currently have in northern Nigeria. So you can see a whole lot of able-bodied men and women who should ordinarily at this time in the year be in the farm, contributing to farm production, but they are displaced and they are in the IDP camps, have no access to food for themselves and their families, and do not have access to farm where they could also be productively engaged. I think it's a major challenge, and I think until this is also resolved, we may continue to have these food shortages across the country.
All right. Now, over 150 nutrition clinics, are at risk of closing due to these funding cuts, right? How will this impact the 300,000 children who are under 2 who rely on therapeutic feeding to avoid severe malnutrition?
Well, this is an issue where we have also been talking to government in these locations, to come up with durable solutions to address these problems. There is no way donors and partners can solve all our problems. So it is time for government also to get involved. We just finished a meeting with the legislatures from across 14 states in Lagos, where we are all discussing what can be done to mobilize adequate resources for nutrition across states. Now, looking at the issues we have in the Northeast, which not only in Northeast, we also have it in the North Central now, in Benue, in Plateau, in Taraba, in all some of the northern southern states as well. So it's becoming a general problem in the country, issues of farmers not having access to farm, and of course, clinics are closing because the global funding is reducing, and now government needs to also come on board with plans on how to mop up these areas and begin to provide support for their people. So I feel that the government at various levels need to pay close attention to these issues and begin to address them. We don't think that the government won't be able to do this if they consciously get involved. The resources are there for some states to be able to, devote appropriate resources to providing the care and need of their population. I know that the Partners and Mission International is engaging with government at the legislative level to make appropriate legislation that would ensure improved resource moderation for nutrition in states. And then being sure that when these resources are made available, we have the tools that can guide the legislators to be able to, assess the progress made in implementing those projects the state will have identified in this instance, especially for these clinics. Being sure that the clinic have access to appropriate tools, appropriate commodities that will be required for these children who are in need, and then be sure that procurement is for these commodities are made at appropriate times to address the need of the population. So we are constantly having this conversation with the states, and we know that this is the direction that the government needs to go.
You talked about, the government, doing more for the people, us looking within and not depending on international aid. But then what about the role of inflation and skyrocketing transport costs? When we decide to look within, what role do they play in deepening this food insecurity, even in areas where markets still have supplies?
Now, one of the things that we have also observed, the fact that moving commodities from one part of the country to another, we begin to see a lot of taxes being placed on those commodities as they transit from one state to another. So we are still having that engagement. Mission International, the Nigerian Legislative Network, which is a network of all the state committees on nutrition and food security that have been formed at the state assemblies across the country, and also with the leadership of National Assembly, we'll be able to also identify how we could reduce or minimize those tasks that are placed on those commodities. One of the things that have been agreed during the National Summit on Nutrition and Food Security recently is to abolish these tasks so that you don't have to task a truck carrying commodity from, say, Zamfara down to Lagos on multiple locations. And that is unacceptable. So because that's what actually increases the overall price of the commodities when it gets to the final place of consumption. So we feel that those tasks will need to be removed. And also that the government should also reduce taxes on food items. So once the government reduces taxes on food items, the price of commodities will not be so, there will not be a significant increase in the prices as we see today. And that will also reduce the cost of food items in the markets, and that will make it affordable for the people that need the most.
Yeah. All right, now, you're aware of the flooding incidents that actually happened in Niger and Borno states, this year. We know that these actually destroyed millions of hectares of cropland. Tell us about how climate shocks are compounding the humanitarian crisis, and, if there are resilience measures on the way.
Yeah, the climate shocks is a common thing we have seen across the globe. Both in Nigeria and even developed countries have also witnessed it. But I think the problem here is how are we prepared to, cushion the effect of this disaster that when they happen. There are certainly early warning signs. Recently, NEMA had come up with warning to states where it's expected that flooding may probably happen within this rainy season. But the question is, what are the states doing about this information given to them? It's only when we come together as a country to begin to address how we respond to such early warning situations, then we can prepare well and adequately to address flooding, for instance, when it happens, and not the task force approach that we currently have. Yes, it will affect the humanitarian interventions, obviously, because there will be huge requirements from donors and from partners to be able to support government. And even with this contracting resource flow, it becomes a major challenge. So I feel that there's need for a wider conversation within the government and with partners to see how government begin to be well prepared for such expected and unexpected disasters, so that when it happens, people are ready to be able to, mitigate it early enough, and then also provide some level of intervention that could also make it make the impact not be so much as we currently see. And then for those who are impacted, how the government will also be able to support them as much required. And then building community resilience also. The community needs to also be able to aware when this kind of messages are sent out, to be prepared so that when this happens, community can come together and support one another and be able to mitigate the overall impact of this gravely human disaster that happens most of the times that we're all seeing them.
Oh, well, I was actually about to ask you about, community networks and how they've been able to fill the gap, left by this particular international agency, or how they're able to do that. But then you have actually, given us an answer. But then the neighboring countries and regional bodies, have actually been responding to risk of cross-border movements driven by hunger as well. Are there contingency plans in place when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think every country wants to secure its borders. And I think the responsibility of government is to make sure that the people are protected. And that's probably the reason why you see countries are very concerned about migration, coming into their own country for their own security. And of course, when you look at the inflow of population from outside the country to Nigeria, they add to the concerns of government on their own security, on the security of the country, and of course, adding much more to the food security situation. So yes, there is a lot of emphasis on countries securing their borders and how they would accept migrants coming into their country. And of course, that means that when countries begin to secure their borders, those coming from other countries who may feel, who are running away from the crisis in their own country, might still not find peace in those locations where they're going to. Yes, I feel that maybe there will be need for cross-border cooperation between Nigeria, for instance, and other countries nearby, Niger, Chad, Cameroon, who are close borders to Nigeria in the north, and of course Benin Republic in the south. So we begin to have conversation around how we all work together to secure our countries and ensure that if there are crises in one country, it does not flow and destabilize the other country.
Yeah. So speaking of cooperation between these countries, are there lessons that Nigeria can learn from other crisis-hit countries where funding-driven aid suspensions were averted at the last minute?
Yes, a lot of lessons have been learned across board. For countries like Nigeria, for instance, we've been faced with the crisis in the Northeast, which is over 10 years now, and it's been dragging. And we also see countries in Mali, in Niger, who are also working together, for instance, the AES countries, working together in a cross-country collaboration. So it's also important that when Nigeria could come together with all these other countries around us, we could actually be able to prevent inflow of terrorists, for instance, coming from outside Nigeria, who are crossing many other countries to come to cause instability in this country. That is very important. That is also possible. But what is very important is that the country thinks about the government of the country think about its own people first and what it should do to protect its people, which is very vital. And when you do that, if it requires cross-border collaboration and cooperation, then it becomes very important that the government get involved in those.
So what about the private sector partnerships? Can they get involved as well? Especially logistic firms or even fintech platforms. Can they offer scalable solutions for last-mile food delivery?
Yeah, it's possible that government can get involved in that. Obviously, we have a lot of fintech solutions that have been developed and they need to be tested and deployed, especially to reach to be able to get access to how to reach communities in some of these locations. Yes, we can use drones, we can use all manners of support with support of AI-driven interventions. I think the government can also explore those because some of the concerns we have is how to reach some of the very hard-to-reach communities in these crisis-ridden areas. So when you have such technologies deployed, they could help to be able to have access to those with minimal casualties, especially when you have to put humans to drive the process in the field. But we've used AI-driven processes. You can be sure that we can reach those communities safely and then be able to deliver the logistic solutions to them.
All right, Dr. Okonkwo, just before we let you go, even as these people actually face impossible choices between starvation, migration, or even danger, what's the single most urgent action that you would ask governments or even your organization and donors to take this week?
Yeah, I think for us at Mission International, we are working with the government, obviously, to provide durable solutions in some of these instances by providing adequate information to them that would help to make appropriate choices and decisions for providing access to nutrition, specific and sensitive interventions for the people, making an appropriate budgetary appropriation for nutrition in their states, and being able to release the funds required to make these interventions happen. But we also recognize the role of the legislatures, who are very key in resource allocation and ensuring the release of resources. And not only that, oversight functions of the legislatures. We are providing support to them. We are training, building capacity of these legislators, and we're also helping them to have tools they need. And I think other partners are doing similar support to them as well, to ensure that, yes, we have a holistic, multi-sectoral approach to nutrition intervention in the country, and then get government to own some of these interventions. And because if government owns these interventions, even if there are shortage of resources from partners, government could still look inwards and begin to do what government needs to do for its people. Partners are only here to support government and to ensure that we provide technical assistance to government, and then government need to be on the driver's seat to push forward what is best priority for government and for the people of the country, and of course for the states. And I'm looking at the N774 project, the initiative that is currently ongoing. It also provides opportunity for local government and the communities to get involved in the nutrition of the people as expected. And of course, if we are able to institutionalize some of these interventions, then you can see a pathway for Nigeria to pull out of this very sad situation we have.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Okonkwo, for your time and for speaking so professionally and in-depthly on this. Dr. Osita Okonkwo, his country director, Nutrition International. We appreciate you for your time.
Thank you for having me.